Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about writing my own tabletop role-playing game. I'm actually answering a question from All Lucky 7 who asked, would you like to write a pen and paper RPG? If so, considering your knowledge of computer game design, how would you approach it? What do you think you would make differently from someone who's never done a CRPG? That's an interesting question. I've seen other people ask me, like, hey, why don't you make a tabletop RPG or make a pen and paper RPG? And I'm always like, eh. But this question made me think, oh yeah, making computer RPGs is kind of a different design space than tabletop. And that is an interesting question to me. So let me answer the base question right off the bat, which is, yes, I've thought off and on, but never seriously, about making a tabletop RPG. I think that having made a bunch of computer RPGs, and they're different, and I'll talk about that, I think I would have, based on that experience, quite a number of advantages and a few disadvantages if I tried to make a paper and pencil RPG. Let's dive into it. First of all, what advantages would I have if I decided, okay, today I'm going to sit down and make a tabletop RPG? First of all, I've talked about all these books I have. This is one of multiple ones that are full of settings and stories that would work great in a tabletop RPG. I think that I also have ideas for system mechanics that would work well there too, even though I had the idea in the context of a computer role-playing game. Some of them, not all, but some of them would be really good at inside of a tabletop RPG as well. I think a big chunk of knowing the difference is I played a lot of tabletops and I've made a lot of computer games and I've played a lot of computer games. There's things that work better when a human is adjudicating a game than when a computer is. Both tabletop and computer RPGs are a collection of rules. But humans are really, really good at dealing with edge cases and exceptions, or deciding what it is that the rule maker probably meant versus what the literal rule is saying. And different DMs do this differently, and that's why, some people like playing with some DMs and not others. But I think in general, because humans are good at doing that, especially coming down on, I would rather have this game be fun than literally follow this rule, I think that edges out tabletop over computer games in many situations. Also, just things like a dialogue with an NPC. In current computer games, that's fixed. I'm hoping that maybe AI in the future can create a more dynamic, flexible, respond to the individual player kind of dialogue. But right now, once you explore the entire dialogue tree of an NPC, you're done. Where on a tabletop, because you have that human GM who's making that dialogue, they can vary the dialogue. You can have continuous interaction. That's why it's fun sometimes to have a patron. If you've ever played games where your player can have a patron they can go to and they can get advice and items and loans and things like that. It's super fun. And that's fun for the DM too, because they kind of get to be this character that's not quite part of the group, but gets involved in a lot of what the group does. I think too, because of edge cases and those kind of dialogues, a human GM allows for a lot more clever solutions by the player. Computer games try to do that. I've tried to do that my entire career. And I've even talked about the way you do that is if you have the rules systemically rather than scripted. So they're consistent, and here's the rule. And then players can find clever solutions that still work within those rules. GMs can do that, but they can also go, I recognize that your solution is something that no rule is covering, but it should work. So let's go with it. Because if there's one thing I've learned about players is they will always think of things that you never in a billion years would have thought of. And I think tabletop games should allow for that. They should even be designed around that idea of don't make your rules so precise. Let the GM interpret them, and let there be edge cases. Let there be clever solutions. Another part of that is a human GM knows when things are getting boring and just moves things forward. A good example of that is, I've talked about fast travel. For a lot of people, fast travel skips the boring part. Like, I just want to be at the dungeon. So click, boom, I'm at the dungeon. Other people are like, well, we just skipped over a lot of interesting things like encounters. But even if you have encounters on fast travel, you usually want to skip over all the point leading up to the encounter. I mean, Fallout and Arcanum and Temple all work like that. You're going over a world map and then you drop in if you have an encounter. So we tried to do that in those computer games, but I think skipping over boring parts is something GMs just have a natural skill at. You're there, or you're not there because you ran into some bandits on the way. Boom. You're immediately into the more interesting part of the game. So because of that, I'm going to wrap out all those things I just set up into. Humans are way better at adjudicating than a computer, and you can design for that. Another thing that you can do in tabletop, cheap, is variation. I know people think, well, that's cheap in computers too. It's like, sort of, but varying color, varying texture, on creatures, varying dialogues, that all takes a lot of extra work in advance. And sometimes it's work that may never be seen or appreciated, and all of it takes up space. For a tabletop game, variation is cheap. You want to have a bunch of different classes and subclasses, all with different abilities and spells. You can do that, and those abilities and spells can be as complex or as simple or as vague or as straightforward as you want them to be, because there's going to be a human adjudicating it. And for players, they only really need to know what applies to their class. So they don't need to know all these things. It's like, I just want to be a warlock. I don't care how druids work. I'm going to play a warlock. So variation is a lot cheaper in tabletop games. Creature variation especially. You can say, here's a dragon. Oh, by the way, they come in different sizes. They come in different colors. They come in different alignments. They have different breath weapons. But you have all these general rules and how they work. Very easy for you to put in a lot of variation. Oh, some of them are intelligent and can talk. Some of them can cast spells. You already have all those rules for spells. It's easy to make it, oh, now I have a dragon that casts spells. Environment variation is probably the most cheapest thing. Tabletop RPG, I can just say, okay, you're in a snowy area. Computer game, you have to make all this new art and props and textures and just code. Because I want footsteps to show in snow, but I don't want them to show on brick, unless it's wet. It's so complicated to make environmental variation in a computer game, and so trivial to make it in a tabletop. That tabletop games should lean into that. That's their strength. Lean into it. The final advantage I think I have, having made computer games, is I've learned over many decades that what people like and what they say they like aren't always the same thing. And because of that, I think I could provide a tabletop RPG that people would like, even though no one's ever asked for it. And it's hard to explain that. I don't have a rule for it. It's completely gut. It's not the programmer side of my brain working. It's the designer side of my brain working and just going, I think I know what you want. You've never asked for it. And you've never said you want it, and sometimes you imply this isn't what you want, but I think you really do want it. But now let's talk about some disadvantages. These are the roadblocks that I would run into trying to make a tabletop RPG because of my computer RPG experience. First of all, I tend to think of mechanics in terms of what's easy for a computer to calculate. What's easy for a computer and what's easy for a human are very different. There are lots of things that are much easier for computers to do. I talked in the advantage about things that are easy for a human to do. I make up a new dialogue. I make up a new character on the spot. I'll describe a new environment. Easy. But here are things that are easy for a computer to do that's a pain for humans, whether they're the GM or player. If you have to track a lot of bonuses and penalty sources, maybe you have, for just an attack, maybe bonuses and penalties come from your attributes, your skills, your perks, your flaws, your items. Tracking all of those bonus and penalty sources is a pain if you have to do it by hand. A computer, that's what they were made to do. This gets worse if you have a lot of inventory slots, keeping track of all the things you're carrying, especially if a game has rules for encumbrance based on weight, or you have a lot of things written down and you just want to go, what are my swords? I know I wrote another sword in here somewhere, but I got to find it. Computers, especially inventory, sort. Show me just my weapons. That's the easy part. So if you put encumbrance in a tabletop, having the player have to keep track of all the weight and maybe sizes and varying amounts of encumbrance based on their fatigue level, ugh. If you get rid of it, then you have these pack rat mule characters that have so much stuff they can't keep track of it. And let me tell you, I've been playing, I was GMing a game once where the party nearly wiped to a group of fire giants, and several of the party members died, and there were only 2 left, and they managed to kill them. And then one of the players turned to the other and went, "Oh, I just noticed I had a potion of fire giant control." I seriously thought the other player was going to kill him. Anyway, an example of that inventory thing would just be ammo counts. If you make a game with lots of different ammo types and that they can stack, and that each one of your weapons may have a different amount of ammo in them and take different ammo, they can take different ammo that does different things. Maybe this is explosive ammo and this is armor-piercing ammo, and then there's a count in there. And if you even want to do the realistic thing of it, if you eject a magazine that isn't empty, you just lose those bullets. All of this, utter pain to keep track of tabletop for the player. It's just a lot of numbers to keep track of. Computer, trivial. Another thing that tabletops tend to do, because humans use them, is they tend to use more discrete rather than continuous things. And by that I mean where a computer would use a lot of numbers, tabletops often reduce things to categories. So you may have numbers that define all the different armor and damage and weapons and all these different things, where in a tabletop they tend to go, well, this is light, medium, and heavy. This is low, middle, and high. This is easy, medium, and hard. All these different ways of expressing things, so they fall into simple categories that the human brain can go, boom. I mean, there's a rule that humans can't keep track of more than, it's like 9 plus or minus 2, so 7 to 11 discrete things, and past that it's just many. It's just, there's a whole bunch. I can't remember them. So that's something that you have to make your tabletop cognizant of the fact that humans need categories. And then the final thing, this could be an advantage or disadvantage depending on how you look at it. Some types of randomness are just more acceptable in tabletop RPGs. I've talked about this in my randomness video. People complain all the time about computers having bad random number generators. Yet, when they roll dice or pick cards in a tabletop, if they get 3 bad ones in a row, they just go, well, that was a bad shuffle, or that was a bad roll. They don't immediately go, something's wrong with these cards. At least normal people don't. Things that would look like bad code or bad design in a computer RPG are completely fine and acceptable and used widely in tabletops. Because when it boils down to it, people are not logical. They just aren't. They're very emotional even when they pretend they're being reasonable. This is going to be hard for me to shift because making computer games, I have a computer GM who is completely and 100% logical, but I've got to make rules for GMs and players who are not logical, or worse, think they are. So that's tough. One thing in general that I always worry about if I was going to make a tabletop is something similar I worry about making computer games, which is so much has already been done. I'm not sure what I would do, especially mechanically, that people would view as different and new and novel. And I don't put this as an ad or an advantage or disadvantage, because let me just tell you that after decades of being asked, mainly by publishers, but sometime, a VP or a fellow designer, hey, what's your hook? Hey, where's the innovation? I've learned that for the most time, this does not matter. You, the player, don't care about these things as much as other people would want you to believe. Yes, you love it when a game comes along and has a new twist on something. But guess what? If I had listened to those people, would I have even made Fallout? People would have just gone, why do people want Fallout? We've already got Wasteland. Go make something else. And it's a strange mindset that people get into. Because of this, I can't really tell you what I'd pull out of all my books to make. It's such a wide range of things I might consider making that all I can tell you is this. If I made a Tim Kaine tabletop RPG, I think it would be really, really fun, but probably not well balanced. Would that be something you'd like? Maybe. Going into it, I just accept that's probably what it would be. Anyway, I hope that answered all your questions. All lucky 7.